Hello, all you fabulous biology students out there. Today, I want to talk to you about the digestive system, and I want to provide an overview, and I will do it rather rapidly, but hopefully with what you've already learned about the digestive system, this will solidify your knowledge. And as you can see from this, we will also use this PowerPoint to study respiration and circulation. The digestive system has a goal, and I think you know that goal. It's to turn food into the building block molecules we need to construct our cells. Those building block molecules include things like nucleotides, amino acids, simple sugars, fatty acids, and glycerol. There are basically two approaches to the digestive system. One is called mechanical. It's the physical destruction of food into smaller particles. And why do we do that? Well, it's to increase the surface area. And why would we want to increase the surface area of food? So that enzymes will have more surfaces to attack, and therefore chemical digestion will be more efficient. So we increase the surface area for chemical digestion, breaking the molecules in the food into their smaller building block components. Let's see how that's done. But before we get there, let's follow the flow of food through the digestive system. Well, food goes in through the mouth, and then it passes down the tube between the mouth and the stomach called the esophagus, and then it goes into the stomach, and then it goes into the small intestine, and then into the large intestine, and then into the rectum, and then it is finally eliminated through the anus. So that's the path. You all should know that path. Let's look at the organs on this diagram. Here we have the esophagus right here, this long tube, and it goes right in here to the stomach. Here's the stomach, and the stomach then flows into the small intestine. The first part of the small intestine is called the duodenum, and then the rest of the small intestine. Small intestine is very long. It's a very roundabout path, but eventually it dumps into the large intestine. The large intestine has a rising portion, a crossing portion, and a falling portion. These are called the ascending colon, the transverse colon, and the descending colon, then the S-shaped colon, the sigmoid colon into the rectum. So those are the organs of the digestive system. And here's how they normally sit in your body. Your stomach would be right here under your rib cage on the left side. Your liver under your rib cage on the right side. Your small intestine way down here, and your large intestine coming up here, across here, and down here. If you hold this part of your belly and you say, oh, I have a stomach ache. No, you really have an intestine ache. You don't have a stomach ache. And often it is the buildup of gas in the intestine that makes your stomach ache. If you feel it here, then you have a stomach ache. Now, there are lots of organs that are associated with the digestive system and play a helper role. For example, the liver in humans, and also the gallbladder, which can be found by lifting up the liver. It's a green sac under that. And the pancreas, which is also under the liver and associated with the duodenum. And we're going to see those three organs right now. So here is your liver, this large lobed organ, and underneath it you see this green sac. Well, that is the gallbladder. And then see this sponge-like organ here, which is blocked by the stomach and associated with the duodenum. That is the pancreas. We're going to talk more about all three of them. Let's follow the path of food, and let's follow the two types of digestion, mechanical and chemical digestion. So the first thing, the mouth masticates. That means chews the food, breaks it into smaller pieces. And the mouth also introduces the first enzyme called amylase. And amylases begin the breakdown of starch. Starch is a carbohydrate. So this is the beginning of chemical digestion of carbohydrates. The mouth also wets the food. A lot of saliva is put into the food to make it wet, to make it easier to flow through your digestive system, and also easier for the enzymes and the mechanical digestion to work on it. The esophagus is just the tube to the stomach. It plays no role in physical or chemical digestion. It's just a transport tube. And here we can see the food as it gets chewed up. You swallow it consciously. It goes down the esophagus. There's a little flap over your trachea so food doesn't go into your lungs. And then it eventually, by muscular contraction, gets into your stomach. That is the mouth to stomach pass. Once in the stomach, two things happen. First, chemically, the enzyme pepsin is introduced, and pepsin begins the digestion of proteins into amino acids. In addition, there is a lot of hydrochloric acid introduced into your stomach. The hydrochloric acid lowers the pH of your stomach down to about 2, and this denatures proteins, so the proteins unfold. That makes them easier to be digested by the enzymes. And the low pH also kills bacteria. It sterilizes your food, which is a good thing because any pathological bacteria that come into your stomach will be, for the most part, killed. And finally, we have mechanical digestion. We create this substance called chyme, which is like a food milkshake. Imagine just blending all your food up in a blender. And the way your stomach does that is the muscles churn the food in your stomach for a few minutes, a half an hour or two, depending on how difficult it is to turn that food into a smooth liquid. There are two common pathologies of the stomach I thought I would just talk about at this moment. One is heartburn, and that's when acid in the stomach leaves the stomach and moves up into your esophagus, where it shouldn't be, and the tissue in your esophagus becomes burned. The second is an ulcer. Now, it turns out your stomach is coated in mucus that your body produces to protect the cells of the lining of the stomach from the hydrochloric acid. If there is a hole in that mucus lining, then the acid will burn the cells on the surface of the stomach, and the result will be a small hole in the wall of your stomach called an ulcer. I'm now going to show you a picture of the stomach so you can see what these pathologies would mean, and also so we can see how the food travels through the stomach. So here you go. Here is the bottom of the esophagus. Food enters here, and then there's a muscle called the sphincter, which tightens down and prevents food from coming back up this way. If that sphincter gets a little loose, then acid will splash up into the esophagus, burning it and causing heartburn. There's also a sphincter at this end of the stomach, and that prevents food from leaving before the chyme has been formed. So you can see here now, you've got the stomach lining, which is going to secrete the hydrochloric acid and the digestive enzyme pepsin, and it's covered in mucus, and you can see it's muscular, and that is going to create the chyme. When the food is turned into chyme, it will be released here into the upper end of the small intestine, which is called the duodenum. The small intestine has two major roles: finish chemical digestion of the food and absorb the building block molecules into the body. The way chemical digestion occurs is by enzymes. Both the pancreas and the small intestine release enzymes into the food, and here are some of their names. Can you guess their functions? Protease, including trypsin. Yes, they break down proteins. Lipase. Yes, lipases break down fats. Carbohydrates. Exactly, they break down carbohydrates. And nucleases break down nucleic acids into nucleotides. The liver produces a substance called bile, which is stored in the gallbladder, and then the bile is released into the food stream in the duodenum. And the role of the bile is to emulsify fats, which I'll explain later. The pancreas introduces enzymes into the food and also introduces sodium bicarbonate, which raises the pH of the chyme back up to above 7 so that it won't burn your small intestine. The job of the acid has already been done. So here we have the entrance to the duodenum, and then you can see there's a duct here through which you have the introduction of bile that was stored in the gallbladder. These tubes here lead up to the liver, and then it comes down through here, and the bile is introduced here. In addition, enzymes from the pancreas come out through this so-called pancreatic duct and get mixed into the chyme. And the sodium bicarbonate also gets introduced there. The duodenum is recognized because it's often C-shaped in many mammals. It occurs just downstream from the stomach. It has this bile duct that we talked about already. And it has a pancreatic duct for the introduction of digestive enzymes and sodium bicarbonate. The pancreatic fluid you'll often hear referred to as pancreatic juice. I've never liked that term, so I don't tend to use it, but you may hear it in other material that you're looking at this year. The cells that line the intestine, as I mentioned earlier, release a mixture of digestive enzymes as well, and this is sometimes referred to as intestinal juice. So now let's talk about emulsification for a second. Why would we want to emulsify fat? Well, you all know that oil and water don't mix, and the same is true with fat and water. And so fat globules tend to be really large in water, and this does not give you very much surface area to digest all that energy-rich fat into its fatty acids. So the bile salts actually break up the fats into teeny little droplets, a process called emulsification. And that gives the enzymes a lot more surface area to attack and therefore to chemically digest the fats. Here's a picture of the entire small intestine. Here is the duodenum, C-shaped. Here is the rest of it, and eventually it connects up right here with the large intestine. Now, we said that the two functions of the small intestine were chemical digestion, which we've now covered, as well as absorption of the building block molecules. And in order to absorb these molecules, the small intestine needs as much surface area as possible. And there are 4 adaptations of the small intestine to increase the surface area so that as much absorption as possible can happen. Let's talk about them. The first one is the small intestine is very long. In you or I, it is probably at least 20 feet long. Second, it's ridged. It looks like a series of hills and valleys, and so these hills and valleys allow more surface area. Third, the ridges are covered in these finger-like projections called villi, V-I-L-L-I, and that now adds a lot more surface area. And you can imagine they're finger-like projections that wave around in the food smoothie that's inside the small intestine. And then finally, those little fingers have hairs, which are also known as microvilli, and you can see them on the outside here. You can see them on the outside of this too. And they increase the surface area of the small intestine by a huge amount. So to repeat, the adaptations for absorption of the small intestine are the increase in length, the ridges, the villi, and the microvilli. Finally, we get to the large intestine. When food gets to the large intestine, digestion is complete. So now, all that has to happen is the formation of the feces. The waste product is formed by the reabsorption of water back into the bloodstream. Why would you want to reabsorb the water? Because water is a valuable commodity to our body. We have to keep all our cells bathed in a solution, and it would be a terrible idea to poop all that water out. You would have to drink so much more. So we reabsorb all that water out of the waste stream back into the body. The other thing is that the large intestine is filled with bacteria, including a bacterium called E. coli. This is a mutualist bacteria. I know you've heard of E. coli that cause diseases in humans, but we have a strain in our intestine that is helpful, and it produces for us 2 vitamins, vitamin K and vitamin B, and they're absorbed with the water and they maintain our health. The other thing they seem to do is they prevent our large intestine from being attacked by hostile bacteria. As a mutualist, they have to get something out of the deal too, and what they get is a large amount of food, mainly the waste stream, from us. So here is the large intestine, and you can see it's got this ascending part, this transverse part, this descending part, the sigmoid part, finally the rectum, which is where feces are stored, and the anus through which they're eliminated. The other thing you'll notice here is this appendix at the upstream end of the large intestine. It can get infected easily, and when it gets infected, it can cause sepsis. Sepsis is quickly deadly, so it's a very dangerous type of infection to get. It was formerly thought to be a vestigial organ in humans, so it was routinely removed during any abdominal surgery. However, people with the appendix removed suffered more infectious disease if it was removed before puberty. So we now know that the appendix plays a role in developing the immune system during embryogenesis and before puberty, and provides immune support in children and adults. It seems to function by exposing white blood cells to potential pathogens that are in the gut. And this is an education camp for white blood cells to know what to look for in terms of pathogens. The appendix also has an amazing medical use. It can be used to provide a sphincter muscle to the urinary bladder if that has to be replaced at any point. So somebody who has bladder surgery that might remove the sphincter around the urinary bladder, which would just be a terrible condition to be constantly urinating, can get a new sphincter muscle built from their appendix. It has also been used to make a replacement urethra, which is the tube through which the urine exits after it leaves the bladder. As a result, the healthy appendix is no longer removed from anybody. So, in review of the digestive system, we have mechanical, which is physical digestion, and chemical digestion, and by that process, small building block molecules are produced from the food. These molecules are small enough to diffuse across the membranes in the small intestine, to be actively transported across the membranes in the small intestine, where they are put into the bloodstream. Food that is not fully digested or is not used or absorbed by the small intestine is expelled from the body as feces, but not before the water has been removed in the waste stream. So that's it for the digestive system. I hope you have a clear understanding of it now. Make sure you have written down your questions and bring them to class next time. That's it for now. See you next time, biology students.